Want to welcome everybody on the Bleacher Report app. I'm Cory from the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube, and I'm joined by a guy who's at Lucas Oil Stadium as we speak, Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. We're here to talk day 2 of Big Ten Media Days, and this is finally a condensed version. I know Kirk Ferentz yesterday, Mark, talked about how he appreciates the fact that they can basically be these coaches and players can basically be done in one day, and it's not a marathon anymore. But I'm sure it's been a fun week for you. And we'll talk about day 2, but just talk about your overall takeaways, maybe before we get to specific teams, overall takeaways from media days.
Well, for one thing, if we go to next season, talk about a marathon, it's going to go to 3 days with the additions of USC and UCLA. So the final 2-day excursion through the Big Ten, we go to 3 days next year. In regards to the overall setting, I just think this is an ideal format and in an ideal setting in regards to working the event, because there's plenty of space.
Got a few struggles with Mark's connection here. We'll try to get him back on. The coaches that were spoken to by the media today: Indiana, Maryland, Minnesota, Nebraska, Purdue, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And of course, all those teams, very different storylines. Michigan, you got the controversy with Jim Harbaugh and the suspension that he is facing due to infractions, NCAA infractions. So how will that impact the darling for the Big Ten Conference? Indiana, totally different situation. You got a head coach in Tom Allen, who's probably, if you're looking at a coach in the Big Ten who's on the hot seat heading into the 2024 offseason, it's Tom Allen. And, you know, he's always a spunky guy, gets everybody motivated. But, you know, going back to 2020 was really their last year where Tom Allen and Indiana did anything, and it looked like they were turning a corner. Michael Penix goes down with the injury, tried to come back in 2021, didn't go well. Then he transfers out to Washington, has an unbelievable season for the Huskies. So you just wonder if this is not a bowl year for Indiana, and I have a hard time seeing it be a bowl year given the division, given the strength at the top and the schedule that team is facing. You just wonder, does Tom Allen survive? I would guess he does not. I would like to hopefully get Mark back in here and get his take from Tom Allen and just his demeanor there in person. Maryland, different storyline as well. It seems like Michael Loxley's got things rolling, got Talia Tagovailoa. They got him coming back for another year. Obviously, they are always good at skill position spots. They have maybe the best quarterback in the Big Ten. Is that hyperbole? I don't know that it is. I think J.J. McCarthy may have an argument to make there, and they got a couple 5-stars who will be taking their first snaps in this conference this year. And then, you got Minnesota. A lot of pieces gone with Mo Ibrahim gone and a change at the helm for the quarterback position with Ethan Kaliakmanis taking over. But he played a little last year, looked pretty good in the bowl game, and certainly has upside. A lot of interesting storylines at the quarterback position, not just with Minnesota, but we mentioned Maryland, and Indiana will have a new experiment, I should say, at quarterback with Connor Bazelak leaving. I mean, heck, Nebraska, we're about to get to Nebraska in a second with Jeff Sims. Very kind of a odd storyline, I think, in the offseason for them with the performance of Casey Thompson last year, which I thought was really good. He leaves, and Matt Rule takes over, and it's Jeff Sims' job. I'm assuming, obviously no final decisions until the end of the fall camp. But and then, of course, Purdue with Aiden O'Connell gone. I bring in Hudson Card from Texas. So just a fascinating conference at the quarterback position. And if you follow my stuff over From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube, you probably know that I talk a lot of Iowa sports. So Cade McNamara is yet another example of that position. And I just think the uniqueness of that position. Again, for everybody who's just joining us, we're just briefly recapping the day 2 of Big Ten Media Days, which, of course, has been taking place in Indianapolis. And we're hoping to get Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, who was there in person over the last couple of days, back in here. I'm sure that, I would hope that the Big Ten Conference has some internet accommodations for their media down there in the bowl, the bottom of Lucas Oil Stadium, which, of course, is the site of the Big Ten championship game in December. So, again, we've talked Indiana briefly, Maryland, Minnesota. We'll try to come back to that if we can get Mark back on here. Nebraska, obviously, one of the most passionate fan bases in the country, and they've had so much overhaul over the last 8 years. The Scott Frost experience, basically taking a dump, for lack of a better word. And, then you have the Mickey Joseph situation. As I said, Casey Thompson leaving, even though he had an exceptional year. I thought he had an exceptional year despite the lack of success on the field for the team. And you bring in Jeff Sims, who's a mobile guy who obviously Matt Rule likes. Didn't throw a real high percentage at Georgia Tech, but it is Georgia Tech. He's going to have better pieces around him, I think, at Nebraska. How quickly can Matt Rule, a guy who's had a lot of experience at a lot of different places, how quickly can he get things turned around there? For the record, and I am an Iowa guy by trade, I am really high on both Luke Fickell and on Matt Rule. I foresee Matt Rule getting it done. I think Scott Frost, when he got to Nebraska, he was the darling given who he was. But the bottom line is, experience-wise, Matt Rule trumps Frost in every way. Managing personalities is a tough thing to do in the NFL. We hear about that all the time, not just in the NFL, but pro sports in general. But he's got experience at Baylor. He's got the experience at Temple, and he knows how to recruit. Does a nice job in the transfer portal. And let's not forget, folks, it's a lot easier nowadays to rebuild a program and to establish a program with a new coaching staff than it ever has been in the past because of, well, really two big factors, and those are transfer portal and NIL. So Matt Rule's brought in a pretty good transfer portal class, as has Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell's done really well at a couple of really key positions. Talk about a change in maybe some philosophy there for the Badgers. But I like what Matt Rule has done at Nebraska in the portal. Can he get it done in year one? It's the last year of the division. I'm guessing there's some level of motivation and pressure to establish yourself year one, because once we hit 2024, and we've talked about this as Iowa people, once you hit 2024, things are going to get a lot tougher for everyone in the Big Ten West, because divisions will go away. You're going to get Ohio State more. You're going to get Penn State, Michigan, USC, and UCLA will be joining the conference, and it's just going to be hard to get to the championship game and win West. Well, you're not going to have West titles, division titles. It's going to be harder to have a chance to win a Big Ten title. So, it's going to be an interesting storyline for Nebraska. But obviously, the fan base support is there. NIL support, you'd have to think, is there, and they've done a pretty good job establishing themselves in the portal. Let's talk a little bit about Purdue. I mean, talk about changes. Again, as an Iowa guy by trade, you lose Charlie Jones last year to Purdue, and what a year Charlie had with the Boilers. But they're losing their best tight end, their best receiver, and their best quarterback. The offense is going to look totally different. How much of a step forward can King Doerue take with Ryan Walters coming over from Illinois and his background as a defensive coordinator? You wonder, what does that offense look? How does the offense look different than it did? I'm sure it's going to look substantially different than it did under Jeff Brom. And Ryan Walters, I thought at Media Day, carried himself really well. He seems to be the type of guy you want as your head coach, very well spoken and confident about himself. I think this conference, including all these day two coaches, this conference is full of really good personalities, really strong personalities. And, even Tom Allen, strong personality. Doesn't mean you'll be a successful head coach, but you bring in Hudson Card and some other pieces in the portal. They did pretty well at receiver, I thought, in the portal, given the change with Jeff Brom leaving. Typically, Purdue's done really well getting receivers. However, with the change of the head coach and who that head coach is, it's going to be hard to maintain the level of David Bell, Rondale Moore, etc. But they did a pretty good job. I think they got a kid from FIU. And again, Ryan Walters, you never know. I think we asked the question in the chat. If you missed the poll, check it out in your app. What team is the biggest 2023 dark horse in the Big Ten? And we did not list Purdue on that list. Maybe we should have. So far, it looks like we've got 36% of people who have said that they think someone else other than Maryland, Wisconsin, and Iowa will end up being the dark horse in the Big Ten. So I'm anxious. We got Mark back on here. Mark, I was just kind of chatting a little bit about Ryan Walters. I was impressed with him. I think he carries himself as a head man, as a head coach in this conference. What will the offense look like without Jeff Brom at the helm, without Aiden O'Connell, without Charlie Jones? Can King Doerue step into more of a lead back role? Just your thoughts on what you heard from Ryan Walters.
That I was wanting to know whether, there would have been any kind of approach to stay with the things that Brom implemented and, talk to the veteran players and get their input on what should continue to be instilled there versus the shakeup of culture that Ryan Walters talked about.
How confident are you in Hudson Card? And how confident did you feel Ryan Walters was in Hudson Card?
Well, I'm confident in Hudson Card. I've seen him play quite a bit of football, and I think he's more than just a quarterback. I think he's an athlete that's going to be needed for this kind of team that won't necessarily have the advantage up front. They'll be disadvantaged most of the time up front against really good front sevens in their division: Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, that has two monsters up front that are going to be NFL players. So I think Hudson Card, go back to the Alabama game, he played on one ankle in that game, and he's a mobile quarterback. He's not a guy that's going to pick you apart from the pocket, and he still was such a gamer, a baller. That's the kind of quarterback that Purdue has acquired here in Hudson Card. A very different player than Aiden O'Connell. Very different. I'm not going to measure the two guys' leadership abilities or their gamesmanship, but the gamesmanship in a very different form, more running, throwing off platform, threatening the defense that way.
I'm going to retreat just a second, Mark, because when you were having some technical issues, I kind of gave some thoughts on Nebraska. I still think that situation is sort of odd, but sort of fascinating at the same time with Casey Thompson and the year that he had statistically last year, which was, I thought, quite good. And you have Matt Rule coming in, and I don't know if that was more of a coaching decision or a Casey Thompson decision. I'm guessing it was more on the coaching staff, just with Jeff Sims and how they view him fitting into the offense. Just your thoughts on that situation and how quickly Matt Rule can get it done there.
Well, especially considering where Casey Thompson landed. You would think, setting himself up for a career, possibly a shot at the NFL, that it would be advantageous to be at Nebraska and not FAU. He throws 24 touchdowns to lead the Big 12. He wins the job, and he's the quarterback for one season. Of course, he got injured late, but I thought the Jeff Sims move was to bring in competition. But I thought Casey Thompson to be a better quarterback. However, I talked to some people, some intel, and I watched Jeff Sims at Georgia Tech. So I had enough time watching both players to have an estimation that there would be a battle, that they are comparable. They're very different type of quarterbacks. Jeff Sims is more of an athlete, like a Hudson Card, and Casey Thompson, the thrower from the pocket. At his very best, Casey Thompson was like a mini Matthew Stafford. Could throw from different arm angles, really pick apart a defense. I made that comparison, and again, folks, don't go crazy. I'm not comparing him to Matthew Stafford from a talent perspective, but that type of quarterback. And where Jeff Sims, I thought it'd be a tremendous battle, but Thompson still with the advantage. And even before they got to spring practice, off goes Casey Thompson. So, and again, I was told by several people that not to be shocked once Jeff Sims was acquired, that he would win the job. I didn't hear a lot of Matt Rule right off the top. He spoke of Nebraska tradition. That's been his talking point, his storyline narrative throughout this entire offseason, is giving great respect to Nebraska tradition and bringing back that tradition, bringing back those standards, and merging, the changing landscape of college football with the great tradition of Nebraska and bringing that pride back.
What I wish, Mark, is that you would have asked Matt Rule, how are you going to adjust to the Big Ten? Because you would have given him an opportunity to say, well, I think the Big Ten's going to have to adjust to us. right? And wasn't that a Scott Frost comment from 4 years ago or whatever it was?
That was a Scott Frost comment. And we're going to be asking those questions next year, of course. And we do have some outliers to the Big Ten norm, and especially the Western Division. And one just left the conference that we just talked about, and that's Jeff Brom. So it can be done. But they would be foolish. And I think Luke Fickell would be foolish in particular, and he knows better than this, to become a completely different program and a completely different offense immediately. I don't think there'll ever be a different program. I think that he knows that a lot of his values and what he goes to in his coaching background very much aligns with Wisconsin football. But from an offensive perspective, that this move into the future is going to be a transition. It's going to be come in stages, and they can't turn over the roster to make a Wisconsin a USC this season.
Well, let's piggyback on that. So Luke Fickell bringing in Tanner Mordecai. I know the storylines in the spring where he's terrible at the open practice, open scrimmage. One look, one glimpse, and I think all of us, including myself, we that's all we have access to, and so we're going to read into that. I would not be surprised if Tanner Mordecai has a really exceptional year at Wisconsin. But they brought in depth at quarterback. They brought in depth at receiver. A lot of work in the transfer portal. And as I said, when you were having your issues here a little bit ago, it's easier to build a program now, right? And to restore a program. Not that Wisconsin needed restoring. Paul Chryst was ousted for a much different reason than Scott Frost was ousted. But I guess my point being, I would not be shocked to see Wisconsin, given the schedule, win 9 or 10 games this year and possibly win the West. I mean, I'm on the record for thinking Iowa's the favorite to win the West. And as I said about Ryan Walters, Luke Fickell carries himself very well, and he's been in the spotlight for so long that we're talking about Cincinnati or Ohio State. Just your thoughts on Luke Fickell and the Badgers.
Well, Fickell was proactive in getting ahead of some of these questions and really wanted to drive home some points. So he extended his time and held off some questions to make some points. And one being the media, the fans, the alumni, the former players, they do not define success here. We define success. Success is we're going to play for championships. To me, that means you're going to the Big Ten championship game. Or maybe going into that final weekend of the season with a shot to play in the Big Ten championship game. So that's their definition right out of the gate. He said, year 1, year 5, whatever year it's going to be, that's going to be, number one, our definition in terms of a tangible definition. The other one was, we're going to be a better team at the end of the season than we are at the beginning. We are going to improve week to week. And I don't think that's rhetoric, looking at his background and what he's accomplished at Cincinnati. And so Wisconsin is going to be a force, and they're going to be a team that you want to catch early because there will be an adjustment. There's no question about that. But Phil Longo is too good of an offensive coordinator. And what gets misconstrued about his offense and his approach is, yes, they like to spread the field, but he had 2,000-yard running backs, Michael Carter and Javonte Williams, at North Carolina. There's still a strong rushing presence. They are still going to pound you, but they are going to be more versatile to play off of that rushing attack with Braylon Allen and Chez Mellusi.
Minnesota, I want to jump back to Minnesota because I kind of gave my 2 cents on the Gophers. I know you're a big PJ Fleck. You're part of his you're a PJ Fleck groupie. You're part of his fan club, Mark. Full disclosure here. But as it relates to rowing the boat and ski you ma, whatever that crap is, I said to you, a week or two on one of our shows, that they're one of the stranger West teams in that they've had so many weapons on offense over the years. Whether we're talking about Mo Ibrahim or the plethora of backs that basically all just steamrolled through the Big Ten a couple of years ago. They've had really good tight ends. They've had exceptional receivers, whether we're talking about Rashad Bateman or we're talking about Tyler Johnson or, Chris Ottman-Bell is really good. I know he's dealt with some injuries. But yet their offense is just really isn't that good. It's if you look at the efficiency numbers, it's been okay, maybe not as bad as they're perceived offensively. They're always strong on defense. They produce solid NFL guys on the defensive side, but you just wonder, why can't they be better? Why haven't they won West championships in a seemingly weak division comparative to the rest of the conference?
I'm usually not the guy that points to play calling and offensive scheme and offensive approach, but because of everything that you just rolled out there, in which they have fielded a top 3 to 5 unit during this nice little, we'll give PJ some love here, as he mentioned at the podium, 29-10 in the last 3 full seasons, top 3 to 5 in the conference, offensive line play, running back, wide receiver, something in that range. Quarterback has not been good, and you got to grill down to offensive approach, too conservative. They've allowed teams to stay in games. They've allowed inferior teams. I'm not just talking about Western Division competition. They lost in a 9-4 season, lost to Bowling Green 2 years ago. So those would be the two things I would point to. And Ethan Kalkibanis, of course, is the next in line to try to prove otherwise.
They have had, here's the other thing about that, Mark. They have had a strange stretch of bad special teams play. I don't know what it was. I have to go back and look at the data last year, but I think sometimes we underestimate the importance of special teams. I know it was awful during the COVID year, and part of that was COVID. And, as you're describing their struggles on offense, bad quarterback play, bad play calling, I'm just in the back of my mind thinking, are we talking about Wisconsin or Iowa? But the reality is the reason Iowa's won a couple of West championships and Minnesota's won none is because Iowa's had one of the best defenses in the country. Minnesota's got one of the best defenses in the Big Ten. But Iowa's had one of the best defenses in the country almost every year and exceptional special teams play. They've had worse skill position players in Minnesota. It's not even close. Now, maybe there's a turning of the ship this year in that regard, but I think there should be some pressure on PJ to get it done. One more year in the division, an opportunity with a change coaching staff at Purdue, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. I still think Iowa's a favorite, but boy, you'd think there's some pressure to start getting it done.
Pressure to what degree? When you say pressure, are you talking about a hot seat?
Win it. Well,
yeah, win the division.
Call it what you want.
You're not going to fire the guy.
Well, you were talking about firing Ryan. You were talking about maybe firing Ryan Day if he goes 10-2.
No, that's not my call.
Well,
but that's Ohio State. That's not Minnesota.
Well, I understand, but PJ's not won a title, not won a West title, a division title.
No.
I'm not saying you're going to fire the guy. I'm not saying that at all. But, yeah, so what's the pressure look like? I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know where they would go to do better than PJ Fleck at Minnesota, going 11-2, 9-4, 9-4, and winning all of his bowl games. But, yes, they need to win the Western Division. They only have one more shot to do it.
Right.
And then the landscape becomes much different.
And it's likely, Mark, I think it's fair to say, we can't say this with 100% certainty, but I think it's fair to say if they don't win the West this year, they may never play in the Big Ten championship game under PJ Fleck ever.
Nobody outside of Wisconsin may play in the Big Ten championship game for a long, long time. We'll see.
Outside of Wisconsin?
Outside of Wisconsin.
You're talking about teams from the West?
Yeah.
From the current West?
From the current West.
Yeah. That's
now, he made it a point to outline that they're playing a brutal schedule. Now, you play the schedule you're given. They have to play Ohio State and Michigan. They go on the road to North Carolina. I don't know who their third Eastern Division foe is, but
and North Carolina doesn't impact winning the division anyways. So
no,
but you're right, and they've had easier schedules in the past. So I'm not trying to rip on PJ, but they've had some missed opportunities in my mind. Indiana, Maryland, I guess real quickly. Indiana, Mark, you were starting to talk about Tom Allen before you jumped off. He always brings it. He brings it personality-wise, but I mean, he's got to be the one coach in this Big Ten that if he doesn't have a bowl year this year, if he doesn't at least go 500, he's probably done.
Tom Allen's great. He is an old school rah coach. It's great to hear from Tom Allen. They have 22 transfer portal additions I see a few that may make an impact. Christian Turner comes in from Michigan, EJ Williams from Clemson. Tom Allen talks about revamping the wide receiver, that they need to do two things. That he was very succinct in saying, we don't create enough explosive plays on offense, and we give up way too many. That decides games. I'm not a stats guy, he said, but explosive play ratio is enormous, and turnover ratio, of course. It's going to be a tough go for them, of course, in that division, and with a quarterback situation that, regardless of who wins the job, they are playing extremely inexperienced there. They have 4 candidates, again, all inexperienced. The most talented is Taven Jackson coming in from Tennessee. But yeah, Tom Allen's gone from a guy that looked like he was going to be one of the great Indiana football coaches of all time, which might be a bit of an oxymoron, to being shown the road.
Right up there with Bill Lynch, Mark. Right up there
Yes.
with Bill Lynch.
Yes. Bill Mallory. It's another
Bill Mallory,
one.
Yeah. So Maryland, maybe the best quarterback in the Big Ten in Talia Tagovailoa. Maybe I don't know. I mean, he's
What do you
certainly
think,
a guy
Michigan
who's
fans?
well,
Yeah,
whatever.
I think
he's
he
the
might
most
be.
decorated of all of those guys. He's the most decorated from a
Oh,
experience and win
statistically, yeah.
Well, no, yeah, statistically, right? I mean, statistically and from a wins. I mean, JJ McCarthy obviously won a lot last year, but I'm saying Talia. How long has Talia been starting there? This is like year 4.
Yeah, he started in 2020. Yes, this is year 4.
Isn't that crazy? So
it is crazy.
What were your thoughts on Michael Locksley? Any surprises or takeaways from his media availability?
So Michael Locksley has not quite risen to the ranks of PJ Fleck, in my estimation. However, he is not anywhere close to where he was years ago, when I certainly questioned his hire because he had done nothing prior to that to earn a Big Ten head coaching spot. And then his early returns were not good, but he's done a nice job there. He had building blocks. They had a good roster. They recruited well, but he is produced on the field, and they get better and better and better. This could be the first season in the history of Maryland football where they finished the season with a bowl victory for a 3rd consecutive year. And they, again, 7-6, 8-5, they keep. Now, the next breakthrough is going to be the one, because can they defeat one of the big 3 in that division? I asked Mike Locksley, I said, you've recruited well, your predecessor recruited well, but most of that we've seen at the wide receiver position, defensive backs. He listed off the NFL production and development there at Maryland. And I said, have you arrived at a place where you believe along the offensive line and defensive lines you can break through against the elite in the conference? Of course, he said yes, they have reached that point. I highly doubt it.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of an unfair question, Mark. So I'm just curious. Don't you feel like they're kind of the opposite of like Minnesota? Like, well, I shouldn't even say Minnesota. They're not the opposite of. Well, I guess they are. They're kind of the opposite. They don't have the quarterback that Maryland has, obviously. But like, this is Minnesota's last year to take advantage of it. Just crap division comparative to the East. Okay, comparative to the East, it's just hard to break through in the East. Of course, you've got Maryland, who is going to be blessed by these divisions getting scrapped next year, and yes, they'll be losing Talia next year. So that's unfortunate for them. But you just feel like the shift with the Big Ten is going to benefit the Terrapins. We'll try to get Mark back on here in a little bit. Of course, Jim Harbaugh and under some serious scrutiny due to some infractions. Sounds like he'll be suspended, and he was the last guy that took the podium today. We know the storylines with JJ McCarthy and their shortcomings, narrow shortcomings in the college football playoff last year, but their recent control of the game, the series, the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. And Mark, how did Jim address the suspension today? I mean, I heard a little bit, but we were getting ready for the stream as he was talking. I know you were as well. Did he bring up cheeseburgers? Did he eat a cheeseburger? I know there was a picture. I don't know if our producer has this, but the producer showed us a tweet from there it is, Alejandro Zuniga. Apparently, and I don't know if this is just, I don't know if this is legitimate, but the tweet here was that Jim Harbaugh was served, well, the entire Big Ten media was served cheeseburgers for lunch today. I don't know if there's some playful whatever from the Big Ten Conference, Mark, or if that's a gotcha moment towards the NCAA, but just your thoughts on the situation with Michigan.
I'm guessing that's a gotcha moment. I will find out in just a few minutes. No cheeseburgers on display for the Big Ten media yesterday. Here in day 2, of course, Jim Harbaugh arrives, and maybe that was his stop before he reached the podium, was just to unload all those cheeseburgers on us, because we should be allowed to benefit just like his recruits. Why not? Now, what he basically said, as I believe he was asked by Adam Rittenberg, where does the NCAA stand on this? What is the hopefully I'm still connected. Where does the NCAA?
Gotcha. It is fitting, folks, that Mark's having issues as he tries to talk about the NCAA, because I always find it humorous whenever the NCAA starts to make rulings and stick their fingers in things, in spite of their shortcomings with NIL and just everything. I think it was Kirk Ferentz talked yesterday about how there's really no structure to this whole thing anymore. And, it is sort of comical when you read, we talk about cheeseburgers. If you haven't read the story, I'm not here to recap the entire storyline with Jim Harbaugh, but he's facing a suspension for some recruiting violations during COVID, for not being, didn't sound like he was totally forthright and honest regarding, some discussions with investigators, etc. But Michigan is the odds-on favorite to win this conference. So, and I as an Iowa guy and from an outsider, a West guy looking into the East and the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, I would be not shocked if Michigan wins again, but to think 3 or 4 years ago that Michigan would win 3 straight games in this series, I'd have told you you're crazy, based on recency. But Mark, you cut off when you're talking about the NCAA, but just implications with the suspension for the Wolverines, and just they're the odds-on favorite to win this conference, this division, and the conference.
So they're going to wipe out these 4 teams that they're playing when Jim Harbaugh is not on the sideline. However, if he's not, and I need some clarification on this, if he's not allowed to participate and play the role of head coach for 4 weeks, then I think that has an impact on this football team long term. And I think that could, while there's an argument that this can galvanize a team that shouldn't need galvanizing, because the national narrative is, yeah, you've been great in the Big Ten, you need to win a playoff game and take that next step, that from a nuts and bolts standpoint of a football operation and the leadership, you take him away for a month. I know they have time to recover from that, but I do think that there could be some residual impact negatively to him stepping away from this football team for a month.
Final thing I want to bring up, Mark, and this has nothing to do with any of the teams that, any of the coaches that took the podium today. Your thoughts on Jim Leonhard being hired at Illinois as an analyst?
Well, that's an amazing addition from them, especially since they lose the guy who just orchestrated one of the 2 or 3 best defenses statistically in college football last year. So they get, in some eyes, an upgrade as a replacement. Now, of course, the role's limited in terms of access to the players and the coaching aspect, but that's what they could extend at this point. I just find it interesting from the Jim Leonhard perspective that he, I guess, just wants to stay sharp and stay involved, and where it appeared as though he was going to be taking a year off, and certainly has NFL, not necessarily aspirations, that remains to be seen, but is qualified to coach in the NFL and has suitors in the NFL and has in the past.
I just find it interesting, and you might be right. I'm comparing it kind of to the situation with Iowa and John Budmeyer, although John Budmeyer did not have the acclaim that Jim Leonhard brought from Wisconsin. I just find that as an interesting dynamic to follow, because you have Aaron Henry in his first year as the DC there, and he's a young guy without much of a reputation, no reputation as a successful coordinator. To bring in a guy like Jim Leonard, even as an analyst, obviously I don't look at that situation and say, well, and he's the heir apparent because Aaron Henry just got the job. I wouldn't think that that's the ultimate plan here. But I just think that's just an odd dynamic to have a veteran, and Jim Leonard, even though he's young, is kind of a veteran now in college football, the Big Ten level, as a coordinator. You get what I'm saying? There's just an odd dynamic there.
Well, that's Brett Bielema getting the job done, making the ask when maybe others would think Jim Leonard's not going to come here and be an analyst. I wouldn't even think that Jim Leonard would be an analyst at one of the best programs in the country. I would think that would be beneath him. But there is also that Wisconsin connection, and I don't know how close their relationship is. But here we are, Brett Bielema, and I'm thinking my wheels are really starting to spin as predictions come close here in the next few weeks toward the Illinois direction, to where I had written them off before. Did not consider Illinois at all. Now I am.
I'll say this, Mark, based on, and I wasn't there. Ironically, I got a press hat on, and you're actually the one there in Indy. But I just want to say this. There's your press pass. Thank you. So I just want to say this. We had the poll up to finish our segment off here, Mark. We had the poll up as far as biggest dark horses in the Big Ten. We've got a three-way tie for first place. 31% Maryland, Wisconsin, and other. Iowa, not one of the dark horses, which maybe Iowa's a favorite. I don't know. Not a favorite in the conference, but certainly I think the favorite in the West Division. But I'll tell you the two teams that I'm higher on now than I was before media days, and maybe I'm reading too far into this thing, Illinois and Purdue. I was, and that's not just from listening to Ryan Walters talk up the program, but also listening to Kirk Ferentz yesterday, and just listening to the coaching staff in general. I heard your interview with, who's the guy you talked to? College football analyst.
Todd Blackledge. Yeah,
Todd Blackledge.
With CBS. Yeah.
And he brought up a Hudson Card specifically. I don't know. Like I said, they brought in skill position guys, and you would expect the defense to be able to hold its own in year one. The one thing they've not been able to do is run the football under Jeff Brom. But, they bring more experience back at running back than basically any other skill position. So maybe they'll start running the football well, playing defense kind of like they did under Brom in, year one or two.
The point being, I think, when you really boil it down, is that, Cory, we might be the only two people in America that are going to miss the Big Ten Western Division. I'm going to miss, right now, Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois. Now you're bringing Purdue into the conversation. And, of course, Wisconsin. I love this division. It's been like this for a few years now, and I enjoy the competition. I know a lot of people think it's ugly on the field and in the standings. It is, yes. I love it.
I do as well. And Mark, I appreciate you taking the time. You've got a little drive home, and you've been busy the last couple of days, so enjoy the rest of your time in Indianapolis. And any restaurants you're hitting up before you head home?
Well, we had some good steak and pork chops last night. Probably not. Probably heading out. We got about 4 hours of interviews in front of us here, and then we got about 5 hours back. So,
check out Mark's stuff. Voice of College Football. He's posting content all the time. He's got a bunch of channels. Voice of College Football channels on YouTube, and of course my channel, From the Hawkeye of the Storm. You can find me at From the Hawkeye on Twitter. As you see Mark's handle there on Twitter, at MarkRogersTV. Mark, appreciate the time. We'll be live with everybody on the Iowa show, Iowa at the Voice of College Football, Tuesdays, 4:30 p.m. We'll have a show later this week, I believe, because we delayed our show this week due to Big Ten Media Days. Football right around the corner, Mark. Camp's starting very soon. Football's back.
Can't wait. See you soon.